This is Open to Hope Radio, featuring Dr. Gloria Horsley and her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley, coming to you on behalf of the Open to Hope Foundation, dedicated to those who are looking for hope after loss. Now, here's Dr. Gloria.
Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my co-host, Dr. Heidi Horsley. Well, Heidi, good morning from California and afternoon in New York. We're going to talk with Janet Gallin today, who is a friend and lives in the Bay Area and who has a wonderful show on love letters. And she is graduated from UC Berkeley, married, and then lost her spouse. And we're going to talk to her about spousal loss and about handling the holiday too, Thanksgiving, Christmas, without a spouse, and give people some tips. And welcome to the show, Janet.
Hi there.
Now, Heidi and I both know Janet because we did a great public access TV show with her and Alan Klein on loss of a spouse. And we hope you'll go to our YouTube site and look at that show on spousal loss on public access, because it's a great show.
And you did a wonderful Love Letters Live with me.
That's right. Talk about your show a little bit, Janet.
Love Letters Live is a talk show I've been doing for about 8 years now, based really on the premise that every experience in life, no matter what it is, has within it the seeds of a love letter to someone. And I think to write a love letter, you know, taking your gratitude to the grave doesn't help anybody. And it's so important and so nice to yourself to be able to say what you feel while you still have the chance. You can write any kind of letters you want. And by the way, when I talk about love letters, which I think are so important in life, it's beyond romance. It can be any moment of memory that you want to share, any kind of gratitude that you feel, letting somebody into your life, inviting somebody into your life, or inviting somebody out of your life in the kindest, most compassionate way possible. Those are all love letters. It doesn't mean that everyone you know needs to get one from you. You may not have that feeling. It's just that if you feel in your heart that you have something loving or compassionate to express to someone, there are wonderful ways to do it.
I love the way you're saying in inviting people out of your life. I'm wondering if, like you have a spouse that dies, and then you decide to get remarried. If you could write a letter to the person that died and kind of inviting them to stay in your life, but inviting them out of your life, but to stay in your life in a new way, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense, and that's wonderful. I've never thought of that. And by the way, every time the topic comes up of love letters, somebody says to me something that is an entire new world of how to do something. I think of writing love letters really as part of your estate planning. You know, we bother to make sure that our children and people we love have our goods and our jewelry and our money and our whatever it is we want to pass on. But what about planning for them to have letters that you've written so they can look at them after you're gone? And when you said, make sure to take a hugging or kissing picture, let that pass on too. It is part of your legacy, and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, no matter how awful the death may have been, will at some level know that they had a really good pedigree because they came from people who knew how to love.
Mm-hmm. Talk about the therapeutic aspects of writing those letters, Janet.
I have never been involved with anybody in a love letter writing capacity, and I've done it for a long time, who hasn't said it's changed a life. They always do. Even if it's your life that's changed, that's significant also. And very often, it's possible to lose sight of the positive sometimes. Mm-hmm. And if there's been a suicide or a difficult death, people who I have a friend now whose husband is dying a horrible death, and she's angry at him because he won't do enough to help himself. And so afterwards, it's very wonderful to sit down and write a letter of everything you loved. Now, what you're doing is you're bathing in the positive. And I find, and other people also, that their breathing becomes easier. And you end up with a smile on your face, which I think has been shown to change brain waves. You know, writing a good love letter, one of the things about it is the planning. And it's kind of a specific process of writing down everything you want to say and then going through it and deciding what you want to include. And being careful that you're not doing anything snide or passive-aggressive. And you may want to say that for another letter. But for the sake of a love letter, which is about the other guy, and his or her wonderful qualities. You just stick to that.
Well, Janet, I wanted to ask you just some nuts and bolts
Sure.
questions for our people who've had spouse loss out there.
Please.
You've remarried, right?
Yes, 25 years ago.
Okay, now talk about, for somebody who's a young widow, what are the things about dating and all that kind of thing and telling your children, and what's difficult?
What's difficult, it depends on the children. It depends on you. I had a very strong and wonderful circle of friends. And by the way, I will tell you one wonderful incident that is still with me. A girlfriend of mine said, now that you're single, your same friends are not going to be, they're not going to be inviting you to their dinner parties, and you're going to be excluded because you're going to be a threat.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I've heard that.
Oh, I didn't believe that for a minute, but, I hadn't been there. So, and my friends, the women, they were all inviting me not only to their dinner parties, they were making their husbands come pick me up and drop me off afterwards, and be sure to walk Janet to the door. Don't let her off the car. I went to a community dinner dance once. It was my community. I went by myself, and a friend of mine, I saw her mouth to her husband, dance with Janet. And I called my friend, this is like 8 months later, and I said, I'm already insulted. When do I get to be a threat? I'm not a threat to one woman in town. They're just absolutely I think that's really important. And if your friends don't invite you to things, invite them. I think the trick of dating, which I didn't know when I was 14, but I know now, is making others feel welcome in your life. If you make somebody feel welcome, of course they want to be part of it. And I was very lucky in some of the really wonderful men I went out with.
And what were you doing at the time that your husband died? Were you working? Or?
I was working. I was doing fundraising.
Okay. Because the other thing I see about you is you're welcoming into a life. I mean, you got to get a life.
Right. Oh, and if you're not working, that's such a good point. If you're not working, volunteer at something. And put your mind to somebody else's well-being. And then write the people who let you volunteer a love letter. Whatever you can do, document it. Write it. Write a letter to somebody. Write a letter to yourself. A love letter. People do this.
Oh, I love this.
And just write a letter to yourself in appreciation for what you've done to get yourself back on the path of the living.
Wow, that's great.
Keep those cards and letters coming. It doesn't matter to whom. And by the way, different than journaling. Because when you write a journal, that's certainly valuable and wonderful. Writing a letter is with the goal of making someone else's life immediately richer. So when you send it to somebody, it's different than a journal that you write in, and yes, that's wonderful, but different.
I love this love letter idea. And I know you've got more online about it. So tell people again where you are online so they can see and listen and hear. And
www.loveletterslive.com. LOVELETTERSLIVE.com. And there's a link to my Examiner article.
And that's the newspaper in San Francisco.
And it's the online version.
Right.
And it's, yes, there's stories. Other people's stories are so inspiring.
And you'll be able to hear me.
Yes, that's right. You can hear Gloria's, which is wonderful. And the love letter to your son.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like this. And talk a little bit more, if I'm feeling depressed right now, about love letters to myself. What could I do to get myself up and going? Would that be a good thing?
Sure. You can start out with, Dear Gloria, I'm sitting here and I don't know what to tell myself because I'm feeling so depressed. But when I look at it realistically, I can see that I had 6 people to dinner last night and I put myself out there and it was beautiful and I was feeling a little off, but I let everybody else have a good time. That's something that you can appreciate.
Right. I like that.
Or I went and got my hair cut and I don't look like the same person I did when I suffered this loss.
So finding those small gratitude.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I like that. So what about if you've lost a spouse and you just can't get going?
Well, I'll tell you, for me, one of the things that was so helpful and so tragic and so devastating also is that I had 2 young children.
Tell us what Dan died of. People probably would like to know that.
Yes, he committed suicide after a very long time, I think, of trying not to. And it was horrible, just in every way possible. And yet, at some point, not maybe a couple of months after, my younger daughter said, Mommy, when are you going to stop crying? We need you to be normal. And that was huge. That was huge.
Wow.
And my older one, who was 14, said, are we still going to have the same wonderful friends and dinner parties that we have always had? And I said, of course we are. So I was guided back to normal. It didn't mean I felt it, but I did it because I had people to do it for. And after a pretty short time, I'd say, maybe 6 months of bursting into tears in the middle of nowhere, by the way, having a perfectly normal conversation with somebody and then just dissolving into tears, which would abate. And there was no control over it. It just came in waves. And I understand this is common. And I thought I was doing well. I was going to work and I was earning a living and I was supporting my children and we were having a wonderful time and their friends were over all the time, wishing they could be part of our family, some of them said. And I thought, how could this be? But still, there was a lot of love and joy. And I thought I was doing really well. And as I say, I was. And yet, at the 2-year mark, almost to the day, something lifted. And my breath was different. And I thought, now I really am okay.
You know what, Janet? I love, and Heidi, I'm sure you're feeling this way too. Janet tells, kind of this light story about love letters. We get through it. And then all of a sudden, she dropped suicide on us. And you know what? You're just an inspiration. I know people who are sitting out there thinking, man, if this woman can get to where she is right now from where she's been, I can do it too.
It takes time. It takes time. It takes friends. And it takes focusing on other people's well-being, I think. It did for me.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, that stigma that people talk about suicide and that kind of thing.
Oh, that was horrible. I couldn't even say the word for probably 15 years. I mean, a long time.
Well, thank you for saying it today and for sharing. I know you're going to help a lot of people out there with their love letters.
I hope so.
And thank you so much for being on the show. Well, Heidi, it's been great having Janet on the show today. Isn't she fun? And it's just, isn't it neat that we know her? We just barely got to know her, and what a privilege.
I feel so lucky myself, by the way.
Been listening to Open to Hope Radio, hosted by Doctors Gloria and Heidi Horsley. Like today's edition, all of our past programs are available on demand at opentohope.com, along with helpful articles, videos, resources, and links to help get you through the toughest time of your life. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter and sign up for our monthly newsletter. Again, that's opentohope.com. Check it out today. Remember, others have been where you are. They made it through, and you can too, as long as you're open to hope.